So we are on the draw here. Creature heavy hand, but it's a keep. Hopefully we're playing against a deck that is just gonna have trouble with dealing with all of our threats. So we see an Evolving Wilds. So can't take too much from that. So we're just gonna go ahead, attune for a mountain here to make sure we have the lands we want moving forward, and that's gonna give us 2 energy. And then we can decide which of our 2-drop creatures we want to deploy next turn. So our opponent's fetching or sacking the Evolving Wilds for a mountain, and it looks like Servant of the Conduit. Okay, so this could be a bit of a mirror match, could be a different type of energy deck. Really not too sure at this point. And there's a Hellion, so a bit creature flooded. And the question becomes which of the 2-drops we want to play. And I think we actually want to go with the Longtusk Cub. To me, it's between the Servant of the Conduit and the Cub. But if we're able to get in with the Cub and produce energy that way, that's a pretty big deal. The upside to the Servant is that we could go Servant into Brawler plus Cub next turn. So, okay. Our opponent is attacking into our Cub, so we do have the ability here to block and then use energy in order to pump it. And then our opponent would have the opportunity to play a pump spell, play a removal spell. So definitely a decision here in terms of if we want to block. The nice thing about blocking is that it gets a pump spell of some sort out of our opponent's hand. Alright, I like making this block. Our opponent could have a 3-drop, which they would like to play here. So we are going to spend the energy, and our opponent could have something like a Harness Lightning, or a pump spell. Okay, so it's going to be a Harness Lightning. But that Harness Lightning, our opponent could have used whenever they wanted, essentially. So we're not really too unhappy about this. We're saving the 2 damage that we would have taken had we not blocked. And now we're able to untap and survey the board here. And I think we want to play the Aether Hub to get another energy. The Hellion is a high impact play, and I like just going with it here immediately rather than something like the Pummeler, because we don't have the pump spells at all. We haven't drawn any pump or any non-creature spells besides Attune with Aether. So at this point, attacking with a Hellion doesn't seem so bad, but we're going to have to continually generate energy in order to keep it around. So we went up to 3 energy. We have to use 2 in order to keep the Hellion in play here. But our opponent's got a Tireless Tracker, so clearly a green-red deck of some sort. We don't know if our opponent's actually playing the sort of deck we're playing, or maybe something completely different. But we are kind of flooding out a little bit. Our opponent notably has 4 spells in hand, because there was no clue there that came into play there off the Tireless Tracker. But we're pretty much locked into continually attacking. We'll see if our opponent has something, or if that's just a chump block in order to preserve their life total. So now we can just go ahead and play Servant and Voltaic Brawler this turn. And so even though we're a little bit flooded, we still had things to do on each of our turns. And we're going to be able to keep this Hellion around for a little while longer. The Pummeler hasn't really come into play just yet, but our opponent hasn't done anything all that impressive, to be honest, up to this point. We would definitely be more scared if our opponent had that land drop in order to turn on that tracker. So we drew in a tune. We can go ahead and cast it and just get a forest here. So we've got options in terms of attacks for sure, but I actually like attacking with everything here. And that's going to put our opponent to the test for sure. We can use the Voltaic Brawler to make it bigger. And our opponent can make some trades if they want to. Put the Tireless Tracker on the Brawler, put the Servant on the Servant, or just chump the Hellion. It looks like the Tracker and Brawler are going to trade. Our opponent's still going to take 4 damage, and we have the follow-up in the Pummeler. So our opponent's pretty aggressively chump blocking. One of the reasons why our opponent would want to do that is because they know that we have cards like Uncaged Fury in our deck, most likely. Which is true. We do have those cards in our deck, but we haven't drawn them. But we're still representing pump spells. So our opponent is playing conservatively, but now they don't have anything to do at all. And so the pass back is definitely what we want to see. There's a Servant. So we can play our Servant. We don't have to pump our Pummeler necessarily. Our opponent could very easily have something like another Harness Lightning. So I actually just like waiting for our opponent to act first. If they don't want to do anything, alright, take 7. That's still pretty good for us. So, alright. Looks like the 7 damage did get through, and we're just going to keep our Hellion around here. And it looks like our opponent may have, well, we'll see. Our opponent may have something to do during our end of turn. So it looks like all along there was a Harness Lightning that turn. So we could pump the Hellion to make our opponent spend another energy, but that just doesn't seem worth it. So the Harness Lightning takes care of the Pummeler. We still have a reasonable board presence and plenty of live draws, though. And it looks like what we had on board was good enough to take down that game. So can't complain about how that went. And looking at our sideboard options, we definitely do have some options here. So the question is, what do we expect our opponent to be doing? Do we expect our opponent to have a lot of removal after board or not? We don't really know. But I think we want to be safe, board in a lot of our removal here, because we're on, especially because we're on the draw. So if we just board in a lot of our sideboard, which sometimes with this sideboard plan, you just want to board in a bunch of cards. So like we can board in a lot of stuff if we want to. And so we'll think about what we want to take out. But inevitably, we are going to end up sideboarding out some of our pump effects. And we can just kind of take out our pump spells in this matchup, because the plan becomes to answer what our opponent is doing rather than go super aggressive. Blossoming Defense is the one card that we might want some of, but since we're taking out pump spells, we want to shave on on Pummelers. We've also got Nissas, which we have the ability to bring them in if we want them. So I like going with 2 defenses, 2 Pummelers, and then a bunch of 4-drops, really. And a lot of removal. So we're going to try this for game 1, and for game 2, rather. And another reason why I like this plan is we won with just creatures in the last game. So now we have even more threats for game 2. So we don't know what type of green-red deck our opponent is playing. It did not seem particularly impressive in the last game, but that may have been due to our opponent not finding lands. So we can't really judge too much from that. What we did see were servants and trackers. So we know that some of our removal is going to be on. And now we see a Deathcap Cultivator. So we can play an Aether Hub out now. We drew a Harness Lightning, so we could Harness Lightning the Cultivator. Instead, though, just going to play a Long Tusk Cub here. The Cub almost demands an answer right away, because otherwise it's going to generate us a lot of energy and could get out of hand. Interestingly, we drew our one of Nissa. Here's a Wild Wanderer and a Handward Battlements. Wow. Was not expecting that, for sure. So our opponent's playing what looks like an off-the-wall strategy. But Handward Battlements could signal Handward Garrison. Is a card we could be up against. So we drew an Attune with Aether. Also have Voltaic Brawler, which we could cast here. We could also just play our Harness Lightning. Either way, we probably want to attack with the Cub here. So pretty close decision, actually. I think we want to play our Attune with Aether. We'll get a land here, and then just play a Mountain. So we're up to 3 energy. And now we can actually attack here with our Long Tusk Cub. If our opponent blocks with the Wild Wanderer, we can Harness Lightning away the Cultivator and then pump our Cub twice. But it looks like our opponent did not want to block. We can still pump the Cub, which I like doing. And then the question becomes, do we want to use the Harness Lightning here? And if we were to use it, we would just take out the Deathcap Cultivator. I think we can see what our opponent does, even though it's definitely risky, because our opponent's going to have access to one more land, or one more mana, I should say, because of the Cultivator. Looks like a big play. Our opponent's sacrificing the Wild Wanderer here. Alright, it looks like our opponent was attempting to potentially emerge something off the Wild Wanderer, but is now put it back into play. Interesting. So we don't really know what's going on. Our opponent was going to sacrifice the Wild Wanderer. Now is moving to combat. So hard to say exactly what's going on here in this game. We don't know what's in our opponent's deck, which is a little bit frustrating. And now our opponent has passed the turn. So we want to use this Harness Lightning, and it's just kind of a question of which creature we want to go after. I think we want to take out the Cultivator. So let's go for that, and we'll see if our opponent has a response here. Now, just having more energy is going to be nice for us this game. So if we're able to kill the Cultivator with the Harness Lightning, we only need to spend 1 energy to do so. So we're going to go from 3 all the way up to 5 energy here. And now we can actually just slam down our Bristling Hydra. And that's going to give us even more energy. It's going to put us up to 8 total. And it's hard to see what our opponent is going to be able to do about this situation. So we've got some pretty nice threats in play. They're not super big right now, but with the energy we already have, these cards can get pretty large. So it looks like it's going to be a block. We're forced to use the energy to pump the cub up. So now, in response to us pumping the cub, we see a Fiery Temper. So what we're going to have to do now is pump it up again. And now it's going to become a 4/4 and a 5/5. We've still got 4 energy left. So we can go ahead and use that energy up. So now our cub is a 7/7. We're out of energy, but it should survive here. And it looks like that is what happened, so pretty happy with that. We've got a 7/7 Longtusk cub. And our opponent used a Fiery Temper and a 3/2 creature as essentially a chump blocker there. Next turn, we can follow up with Nissa. We can follow up with Pummeler and Voltaic Brawler. We've definitely got options. Now, to be fair, our opponent is playing a deck that seems a little bit unusual. Might not be a great deck. Hard to say. Certainly is playing some cards that aren't normally seen, but it seems like some sort of a green-red ramp style strategy. But green-red ramp is a deck that the energy deck is just going to prey on no matter what, no matter how that deck is configured. So this is a very good matchup for us. The Harness Lightning, unfortunately, we don't have energy left. So our Hydra is going to die. But now I think we want to just go for Nissa here and just really put the screws to our opponent. It's going to be super hard to answer this Nissa and the Longtusk Cub. Now our opponent does have a Highmoor Battlement, so a haste threat could get rid of the Nissa, potentially. But either way, our opponent's at 5. So it's hard to really picture what our opponent could play here. And that's going to be it.